some doctors discovered that they have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So they shut up and listened. And they listened to the crazy stories their patients were telling them. You see, doctor, when you were doing surgery on me and I was clinically dead, I would see you from above and I saw what you were telling to your partner, and I even flew outside the room and I also saw beings of light and so on. Some people were brave enough to tell it, and some doctors and then scientists were brave enough to start annotating that. And so these anecdotes, when they were piling up and being organized, they become data. So a science of near-death experiences started 50 years ago. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Not only because of the content, but also the format. It's really amazing, my first time here. And I'm very happy you're here. So briefly, my credentials: I'm a theoretical physicist. I did a PhD more than 20 years ago. I need to renew my physics license because that's back in the future. Then I turned a neuroscientist by chance. I'm also a father and a husband. I'm an activist, as you'll see, and a little bit of a clown, so it's good that we are in this tent. I'll tell you 2 stories today. First, briefly, my own, but don't worry, it's not going to be too autobiographical. And then I'll dare to tell you the story of science, maybe in 10 minutes, and then we'll go into crazy shit. So that's the plan. That's the plan, right? I'll probably lose you because my mind works like you're going to hear, but don't worry. I'll just carry around and pick you up along the way. And if you get lost, enjoy as well. Okay, so 4 years ago, I almost died. So I had a stomach leak. I didn't know where it was coming from. I went to the hospital and I spent there many days, and I was bleeding away slowly. And they were trying to figure out where it was coming from, and I was getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And one Thursday night, the following day was my wife's birthday. She was gonna turn 40. And I was saying to myself, don't die today, or this is not funny. I was saying, don't die today or tomorrow. And then I had this vision, dream, hallucination. We'll see what people say that was. But I was in this tunnel, which wasn't a tunnel really, it was a well. And I was looking upwards, and there was this yellow light coming. And there were these 3 figures at the end of the tunnel. I know who they were. I don't say who they are. Maybe if you ask me then, in private, I'll tell you. But I know who they were, and they were waiting for me. And I knew, and this is important, I didn't think that, I didn't feel that, I didn't believe that. I knew that if I would accept their help, I would die. And as you would say in Britain, I'm from Spain, we're rougher, but in Britain I would say, I'd rather not to. So I came back. I decided to come back, and I was back in the room. I also had another dream / vision / hallucination that I normally don't explain, but it's relevant. I was in this old town, and there was these huge animals, like 5 meters tall, and they were hybrid, like a giraffe with a neck of a lion, and a polar bear with the head of a crocodile, and they had fire in their head, and they were coming on top of me without squashing me, and they were bending their head onto my head one after the other. And then they became flying carpets and went to the mountains. And no, I didn't have psychedelics while being in the hospital, and no, I didn't have weird medication. All right, that's my story. So then I have surgery. I have a big reminder here. They saved my life in the hospital. I was at the ICU for a couple of days. I lost 13 kilos in a couple of weeks, so yeah. And then I had to just recover. So far, so good. And then I had to integrate that experience personally, as you would all do. So far, so good. The only slightly different thing, and maybe that's why I'm here today, is that I decided to integrate that experience professionally. So I'm a physicist, one leg. I'm a neuroscientist, another leg. So I say, hey guys, physics, what do you tell me about what just happened? Neuroscience, what do you tell me about what just happened? So I'm going to tell you what they say. Physics says, I don't know. You know, we work on theories of everything except what really matters. pain, love, death, smell of cappuccino, and all of that, right? And I'm a physicist. I still am, and I know what they're doing, but nothing to say. Neuroscience, what's that? Hallucination. Your brain is malfunctioning and you have this weird stuff. Come on, carry over. But no. So I scratched a bit, and now I'm going to tell you what I think is going on. So that's why I think this is called the future of consciousness. Now, this was the autobiographical part. Now we're going to move into a historical part. So we're going to do a little bit of biography, you just heard it, history, empirical stuff, theory, and at the end, sociopolitics. So it's like a little bit of everything like we have here. Okay, are you ready? Yeah, okay. Man, okay. I need to be quick because there's a lot I want to tell you. So, the history of science in 5 minutes. Why science didn't have anything to do, particularly physics, about what happened to me? Okay, then I went back to Galileo. 1623, he wrote a book called The Assayer. It was a long letter. He sent it to the Pope. It's amazing. I don't have time to tell you about it. Go and read it. Go and read it. Read Galileo. All right. So, in that book, he has 3 great things, 3 jewels. The first one, nature is a book whose language is the language of mathematics. So if you want to understand nature, learn mathematics. That's what we physicists believe to the core. If you know the language, you'll know the secret. If you don't know the language, good luck. Somebody will need to translate it for you. Okay. The second thing he said, I don't care what 1,000 birds, starlings say. The phoenix or the eagle goes, does the experiment, and that's what really counts. Science is not a democracy, unfortunately or fortunately. And the third thing, if those two weren't great enough, it's what's really important to understand why science hasn't studied consciousness until very, very, very recently, okay? And he was talking about, well, the book was about the controversy between the nature of some lights in the sky. Are they comets, physical objects, or illusions? He was wrong, but in any case, what he said at the end of the book in passing is key. And I paraphrase, as if I was in a theater, I am, right? Galileo says, well, there are things in nature that travel in first class, and there are things that travel in second class. And we're going to start this business we call science, studying what lends itself to measurement and mathematization first. These are the things that travel in first class. Contact, the things that move, how things fall, right? So that's when physics starts, and it's such a great business that we just go on and on and on. And then chemistry comes, and then biology comes. And we all kind of use what our grandfather said, Galileo, just use the language of mathematics to ask nature its secrets and study those things that led you do this amazing, mysterious thing. We can measure them. Okay, now, we travel, and the business is going great. Now we move, I need to be quick. I could be slower, but we need to be quick. We arrive at the end of the 19th century, 250 years of great progress, and then psychologists have the chance to revisit what Galileo had left for later. But we forgot, because the business was going so great, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. But what about psyche logos, psychology, psyche, the soul, logos, you know, knowing about or the science of the soul. But psychologists copied the big brother, which was physics. And so they said, well, how do we measure and mathematize the soul? Oh, we can't. So we'll say it doesn't exist. And so psychology became behaviorist. And that was good enough for a few years. And then we enter into the 20th century, and I need to fast forward, and then we have world wars. And then behaviorism becomes cognitivism. Because, you know, beings don't only behave outwardly, but they also seem to think and have perception, intention, memory, and so on. Okay, I'm rushing because I have a lot to tell you. And so we go through this desert until the 90s, the 1990s. And a Nobel laureate, Francis Crick, comes and blesses the field of consciousness and says, well, you know, guys, consciousness used to be a taboo, but now we're going to study it scientifically. Now this is allowed. And so now there start to be laboratories doing it, and grants, and students, and journals. And this is the only 30 years. So you got the perspective, 400 years, but literally a science of consciousness properly done, and intensively done, 30 years. Okay, I can tell you more things about that, but to summarize, where are we now for a science of consciousness? We had 0. Then when it started, it could only start in one way, which is in a materialistic, reductionistic, mechanistic way. Because that's how the orthodoxy would get on with it. Okay, it's going to be something that the brain produces. You know, we just need to look into the brain. If we're clever enough, have enough time and enough money, this is promissory materialism, okay? Just give us more years, we'll figure it out, we'll crack the problem. That's what we do, we crack problems. Where are we today? From 0 to 1 to 2, materialists always offer you a 2 alternative forced choice between my way or the highway, meaning materialism or dualism, and of course dualism is for stupid people, so you're gonna keep that. So we go from 0 to 1 to this kind of trick of 2. Today, we have more than 300 theories of consciousness. Robert Lawrence Kuhn mapped them last year in a paper, and now I've helped him with others to have a website. It's like the Wikipedia of consciousness. You can go and check it, a landscape of consciousness. And he has mapped more than 300 theories. There's this other joke, and I don't have it with me. Theories of consciousness are like toothbrushes. Everybody has their own, and nobody wants to use one another's. So that's where we are. And more seriously, many other things are going on. So you have a sense, nothing for nearly 400 years, and now the Wild West. Consciousness studies today, it's in its adolescence phase, I would say. So there are tribes and there are conflicts, and I don't have time to get into them because I want to tell you more interesting things. Okay, so now we understand a little bit why it is taking us so long. These theories of consciousness, half of them are materialists. Materialism, by the way, is the philosophical idea, belief, if you want, that the only really real thing is matter. If you find a card-carrying materialist, ask him or her what matter is. And they'll say, like, I don't know, but everything is really made of matter, right? The other half of the table are non-materialist theories. Why are these important? Let's go back to my near-death experience. And they're important because now, and that's where you're going to lose, I'm going to lose you because I go back and forth. Now we rewind 100 years to William James, end of the 19th century, 1898. He wrote a paper or an article or a piece, an essay called On Human Immortality, a topic we all care about in a way, right? And he said, there's no doubt that the brain plays, and you can add the verb and the adverb and the adjective you want, a key role in thought, he said. But the key question is not that. The key question is, what's the nature of that function? So my main idea for today, William James's idea for you, is this one. There are 2 big ways we can think about a brain. 2 P's. In Spanish, this works better because there's the left-wing political party, it's called PP. So I say, well, remember, I'm going to talk to you about the PP. And so the first P is the brain is a productive organ. Brain produces everything, everything. Perceptions, intention, consciousness, memories are stored in it. The second P is permissive organ, permissive organ. So when I read James, I said, if the brain is not what they've told me as a neuroscientist, because 99% of neuroscientists are convinced that the brain is productive. They may not even know that there's an alternative. But if the brain is permissive, then the crazy shit I'll tell you in a minute is not only possible, it's perhaps likely. Okay? Okay. So now we go into near-death experiences, and we'll go back to the brain in a minute. So 50 years ago, Alex, relax. Voices talk to me. I'll tell you about Gollum and Schmeagol in a moment. 50 years ago, Raymond Moody wrote a book that started the science of near-death experiences. And the move was amazing. And it was due to 2 factors. One, there was technology to resuscitate people who were clinically dead. Your brain has stopped, you don't breathe for seconds or minutes, but they bring you back. Okay, that's one thing, technology. The second thing was a human, I would say advanced some doctors discovered that they have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So they shut up and listened. And they listened to the crazy stories their patients were telling them. You see, doctor, when you were doing surgery on me and I was clinically dead, I would see you from above and I saw what you were telling to your partner, and I even flew outside the room and I saw what was going on there. There's some cases of people even looking at things that are at the ceiling, and I also saw beings of light and so on. What do you do with that, right? Well, some people were brave enough to tell it, and some doctors and then scientists were brave enough to start annotating that. And so these anecdotes, when they were piling up and being organized, they become data. So a science of near-death experiences started 50 years ago. Okay, a lot to say about that as well. We know now, because of certain people like Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia or Pim van Lommel and others, we know what kinds of experiences people have, what do they tell, whether they're conserved or not, whether they're changed according to gender or cultural background or even age, right? And there are aspects of those experiences that are conserved. So you can start to do a science of it. Now, there are also other kinds of studies which are really hard to do because people die. They need to be brought back. They need to be willing to tell you the story, right? And then those stories have different degrees of objectivity, you could say, from, I was in heaven to I saw exactly that movement that the surgeon did when my brain was probably off, right? There are all these experiences now, and they're also, when you're there, in some cases, they can go quick enough and place in the person that's clinically dead an EEG, an electroencephalogram, and see at least at the surface of the brain whether the brain is flat or not. So that's really the edge. And then some people have put like Sam Parnia tablets on the ceiling to see if there's an out-of-body experience that's veridical, meaning it has a correlate with the objective world. Well, if we could find that needle in the haystack where the person remembers something that's veridical and the EEG is flat, well, we're getting closer, maybe not to proving, but to bring evidence that 2 things: minds don't die, maybe when brains die, and maybe that there's life after death. Now, I'll come back to this, but do you hear the word? Pseudoscience. Pseudoscience. Right? So is it pseudoscience? Is it supernatural? Is it paranormal? Is it extraordinary? Fucking prefixes, They just kill our ability to ask these questions. Science, and I'm not scientistic, but science in principle should be able to study anything as long as it's well done. Now, why did I tell you about William James? Because, and this is really key, if you think that the brain is a productive organ, all of those stories are simply hallucinations at best, nonsense. The word is impossible. If the brain is a permissive organ, yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of a filter. And so it's filtering the light of consciousness, if you want, metaphorically. And even when the brain dies, mind could be still going on, or consciousness.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below.
With a free trial, you can enjoy the full talk and thousands more.
Thank you for being part of the conversation.